Well, it's wonderful to be back at the festival. I think the last time I was here was for my art book, Glittering Images, in 2012. And this new book is my 8th. It's a collection of pieces published in a wide variety of places, some very obscure. I'm extremely eager to get some of that material finally, into a major public space. In particular, I have this massively long essay called Cults and Cosmic Consciousness, Religious Vision in the American 1960s. I think it demands a rethinking of what the legacy of the 1960s was about. It wasn't just about politics, it was also about culture. It was about a kind of perspective on the universe, full of wisdom and daring. And I think right now, with the political passions surging in the United States, I think a return to this, to me, the expanded vision, the expanded imagination of the 1960s is absolutely critical. I think one of my primary themes has always been that there is a higher vision, a higher perspective that takes in the whole of the universe, that society is important, but it's only a small box in the vastness of the universe. The society, I've obviously I've been analyzing political issues, political personalities, political ideals and failures, in my work, but in no way would I identify myself purely in partisan terms. I don't think any intellectual should be partisan, or rather, in real life, you belong to a political party, but you don't make the mistake of thinking that that political positions and membership in a party is a kind of new dogma, new religion. So what I'm calling for in this book, as in my prior writing, is a return to serious consideration of religion. I'm an atheist, but I have been calling for 25 years now for the ideal core curriculum for a multicultural perspective in colleges is a study of the great world religions. We're talking here about Hinduism, Buddhism, Judeo-Christianity, and Islam. I don't know how you can understand any other culture without knowing the religious premises of that culture. And also, by studying religion, you are able to you're able to experience poetry of the highest level, art, architecture, mythology, and so on. The present doctrines that suffuse elite education in the United States seem to me utterly pernicious. I've been railing against postmodernism and poststructuralism for a quarter century, and warning of the results of gutting the humanities curriculum, as has been done. And now we see it all around us, a whole generation of young people whose parents are bankrupting themselves, send them to elite schools to receive an education, basically cynicism and chaos. There's no sense of historical perspective. History is regarded as a false narrative, okay, that is imposed by power cells who are simply interested in establishing and spreading their own personal power and so on. Just like simplistic kinds of canards, flowing from the mouths of professors who have made no serious study of history. Now, what you get with me is someone who was very interested in archaeology from earliest years. And my first job I wanted to have was a Egyptologist. When I say anything about culture, contemporary culture even, I have behind this my sense of history, not just to the great civilizations of the ancient Near East, but back to the Stone Age. This is none of my opponents in academe have any kind of scholarly a perspective of this kind. I don't regard them as scholars, in fact. We have, the leading figures in academia of my generation are careerists. Okay, they're professional cynics. They pretend to a leftism that is false because these people are multimillionaires. The leading leftists, live like kings. The leading leftists on college campuses said nothing about the gross expansion of a tyrannical administrative class of bureaucrats. They said nothing about the obscene rise in tuition costs, which have had such a horrible negative effect on families and burdened so many students with debt. They said very little about the enslavement, the servitude of adjunct instructors, paid a pittance and denied benefits and so on. Okay, what kind of leftism is that? Okay, pretty phony. Okay, all right. But much as I enjoy belaboring my opponents, I want there's much else in my book. I'm very happy to finally be able to get my piece about very early piece about writing for the internet, and finally, into in the public arena here, because I was a co-founding contributor to Salon.com from its very first issue in 1995, at a time when, hard to believe, the web was not being taken seriously by academics, by other journalists. In fact, a prominent political journalist at the Boston Globe warned me, told me, why are you writing for the web? No one takes the web seriously. Okay? And now, the web has this giant tsunami, for good and for ill, has caused the slow financial sinking and eventual extinction, probably, of newspapers themselves, which is, to me, a tragedy. I feel I learned a great deal from newspapers. There's something about the physical newspaper, turning the pages, surveying it, scanning the news, taking all the news in, that you really can't get via the web. My main news intake now is from the web, but I know that my students don't read newspapers, and that after my generation goes, there'll be no newspapers left. Everything will have moved to the web. I think it's extremely unfortunate, because what it means is that journalists now don't work up, through small regional newspapers, learning how to go out there with shoe leather and pursue a story, gather facts, act like a detective, and then arrange all these facts in a rational, logical manner, and then have an editor, there, to provide feedback for this material. Now, people, what's coming out even from the New York Times. Oh my God, has the New York Times degenerated? Oh Lord, it's like the level, the columnists are like the level of women's magazines, from back when I was growing up, just like this pouring out, no sense whatever, that an article that one writes, has a structure or should have a structure, that perhaps it should have paragraphs, that perhaps it could be edited and shortened and be far more forcible if condensed. I'm lucky enough to have been able to write for the newspapers at their height, still in the early 90s, before the arrival of the web or of web journalism. I loved it because the very things that most professors consider limiting, that is the space considerations, I found very stimulating to be able to express all of one's points within 800 words or 900 words, the classic op-ed structure as it was developed originally by the New York Times, I think. And then often at deadline there'll be some other issue. The piece will have to be shortened further because the art department has have a big lavish illustration which always eats up space. So that was a real discipline, that period. And now with the web you can go on and on and on as long as you want. But beyond that, what I'm hoping people are noticing, that as some of these Tony literary journals, like the New York Review of Books, go online, that you can see how fossilized the prose of those journals is when it transfers to the web. You try to read it on the web, these things that are written for the New York Review of Books or even the Times Literary Supplement and so on. All right, and oh my, the verbosity. The veracity, it's clinging to a style that's really quite dead. So in my essay about writing for the internet, I described how my salon.com column evolved, and how I learned that to write for the web, you're writing for a screen. You're writing for a TV monitor, okay, essentially. And now, of course, people are reading on iPhone. But the writing for the web, the web is a visual medium. And you have to write in a different way for it as you would write for essays and books. So I detail my process of discovery of that, and how I conceive of writing for the web as floating blocks, sort of like a Mark Rothko painting, okay, floating in the air. And I deliberately devised visual details and games, for it, that the words themselves should look interesting, okay, on the page. So this produced my salon column, which I say. And nobody has snapped back about this yet, but if they do, I will crush them. All right. My salon column was the first blog, okay? My salon column invented the blog. And no one, okay, was writing like that, okay, writing in a personal way about personal events and so on at length on the web, okay, before me. You had Mickey Kaus writing. The only other person doing anything parallel was Mickey Kaus with his political column. But I was already writing for the web before he started, and so I feel that that's part of my legacy. I think that some of my language, my intonations, I find it everywhere. People don't, sort of become almost the voice of the web in ways. All right, so there's that. I'm thrilled to finally get out into print again, and I have been eager to get my essay on David Bowie. Okay, finally, it was commissioned for the catalog of the giant costume show that the Victoria and Albert Museum in London did in 2013, and it's been the whole show has been circling the world, and just huge, people turned out, multiple generations of people turning out to see his costumes and so on. So this is an essay I wrote about gender, the issue of it's called David Bowie at the Theater of Gender, David Bowie at the climax of the sexual revolution. And what I'm establishing, as if it needed to be established, was that the current dogma of gender studies, of gender as performative, for heaven's sakes, David Bowie was way in advance here, and anyone who was alive and breathing, okay, in the early 1970s would have been influenced by these ideas. You do not need to hack your way through a lot of post-structuralist garbage, okay, to get to this idea of a gender or of human behavior as performative. In fact, it was in, the great work, presentation of self and everyday life by Irving Goffman, great Canadian-American sociologist, whom Michel Foucault stole from, as he stole all of his ideas from prior figures. All right, but let's not get sidelined there. I just love to punch Foucault. All right. He knew nothing. When will people realize this? All right. So there's the David Bowie essay. I'm very eager to be seen, in a general book. And also my piece, I'm so happy finally, my piece on Tom of Finland, okay, that was commissioned for the Taschen, a German publisher that does fantastic art books. They did the complete collected works of Tom of Finland, giant volumes, and asked me to write on him. And he is, for those of you who don't know, he is the creator of the leather look, of the sadomasochistic S&M leather look, okay, of that was became such a dominant icon during the period just following the Stonewall Rebellion, okay, of 1969. So it was 1970s gay men internationally, okay, were imitating these leather-clad personae of Tom of Finland. Like, he's incredibly influential. He's not really taken seriously as an artist because he's regarded as an illustrator, but you can scarcely imagine an art, anyone in the arts having a greater and more enduring influence than Tom of Finland. Okay, and then my usual themes about education. After teaching for 47 years, I'm in absolute despair about what's going on in the public schools. Okay, I think it's an absolute disaster. I am well positioned to sense what's going on. I'm not one of these professors of the. I teach at a small art school. I'm not teaching at one of the big Harvard, Princeton, where the only students who come through are those who are the most eager beaver, best students, culled from internationally and so on. I mean, that's not. At my school. The students, where I've been teaching for 34 years, the students have to audition or have to present their work in order to be admitted to a program. So essentially, my school is a vocational school. And because of that, also, they come from a great range of social and economic backgrounds. Therefore, I do have some students, from very good suburban schools, but I also have students from the inner city, African American dancers and jazz musicians and so on, including talented dancers from farms in North Carolina, etc. So it's a huge range. So I'm able to monitor what they know. Each class that I have, it's not I don't do those prefab things, okay, where there's like a prefab. This day we're going to do this. This day we're going to do that. Okay, I'm always reading the group and see what do they know or not know, and what do they need. And I have been horrified. I think it's probably for 20 straight years now. I've been horrified as year by year by year the amount of general cultural information that they're able to recognize has diminished. But also, absolutely major landmarks in Western culture also have receded. It was 15 years ago. I've told this story before. It was 15 years ago already when I was in my Art of Song Lyrics course. I was dealing with the great Negro spiritual Godal Moses, which I had done year after year before that. And I was having trouble on this particular day. I play the song, look at the lyric, and I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to talk about it, and I just felt this resistance. I felt like I was carrying the entire class, and I couldn't figure out what it was, since I had taught that before. And it suddenly hit me with horror that no one recognized the name Moses. All right? The only people who did were African American students who have a church background, because of course the church remains a great center of community in African American culture. And I was in despair about this, and I remain in despair, because here we have a good example of the failure of secular humanism. There's people, you have parents not raising their children with religion because it's the liberated thing to do. Why impose all that on them? As a consequence, this access to the Bible, one of the most influential works ever written, this compendium of Hebrew poetry with its great hero legends and so on in it, and so there's a whole dimension of the history of culture that is lost when young people have no religious affiliation, whatever. But when young people no longer recognize the name Moses, okay, what is left of Western civilization? Okay, is what? I mean, they know the Kardashians. Okay, that's where we are. That's the level we're at. Now, so that's another of the issues for me. One of my ambitions always from the start, okay, was to develop an interpretive technique that could be used for both serious subjects, scholarly subjects, and also for popular culture. it's hard to remember a period when being interested in popular culture and thinking it important was considered rather déclassé and actually showed that you were not a particularly serious person. And when I was in graduate school, there's absolutely no doubt, okay, I was in graduate school at Yale from 68 to 72, there's absolutely no doubt that I lost, I lost a lot of points, right, with the professors who found it frivolous that I was interested in Hollywood and Hollywood history. European art films were then, didn't have cultural status, coming from out of the 1950s into the 1960s and so on, but not Hollywood movies. But I've always taken popular culture seriously, and I long to be able to develop an interpretive vocabulary and an approach that would work for both high culture and what used to be called low culture. I call myself a Warholite because Andy Warhol's influence fell on me very, very heavily. He came from an immigrant family in a factory town in Pittsburgh and so on, and he too saw the beauty and the magic of advertising and of the great stars. You just take a photograph and treat it in some way, a photograph of Elizabeth Taylor or of Marilyn Monroe. These are just movie stills. I mean, he wasn't even, it wasn't that he was actually even drawing the original pictures. Then Warhol's, I was lucky enough in college in upstate New York to be able to see Andy Warhol's short films, just literally within a year of him making them. And these short films have disappeared off the cultural map. I know they're available at the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, but otherwise people have no acquaintance with them. They seem to mix up Paul Morrissey's later movies like Trash and Flesh, okay, with these, the early films are these improvisational, rather grainy black and white films, rather absurdist that Warhol did with drag queens and with male hustlers and Edie Sedgwick and et cetera. And it had absolutely an enormous impact on me. So I've remained a Warholite, by which I also mean that, and this is a point I've repeatedly made, that pop art ended the avant-garde. Okay, the avant-garde was killed by pop art. Avant-garde had been a noble tradition going back to the Romanticism, to the early 19th century in terms of painting. And the avant-garde artists who are trying to develop a new style, they paid a price for their nonconformism, in poverty, okay, in derision, in loss of status, et cetera. Okay? So there's one avant-garde movement after another of the very highest heroic level, that went on for 150 years in the arts. And then what happened with pop art is when pop art embraced popular culture and mass media via Warhol and Lichtenstein and so on, that space, the oppositional space between the fine arts and the surrounding media culture ended. Right. So now, since Warhol, since pop art, visual arts have been struggling for some kind of identity. There were different sort of mini movements. Performance art was probably the most long-lasting. David Bowie can be regarded as actually part of that in the 1970s. Eleanor Anton, whom I've written about, and Glittering Images was also a part of that. But right now, okay, we're at a period where avant-garde gestures are mimed, okay, hypocritically mimed by people. You mime them, okay, do something shocking, take a religious image, okay, Catholicism is the easiest target, okay, and you treat it in a very, very negative way, and oh wow, you've made an avant-garde gesture. Well, it's absolutely grotesque, okay, derivative and just contemptible, right? Because if you don't pay a price for your avant-garde gesture, it's not avant-garde. It's just playing to the gallery. Okay, it's increasing your it's increasing your income. Okay, it's getting you attention, okay, and acclaim. Okay, and I'm sorry, it's horrible. So as a thread through this book are the pieces I wrote condemning the Brooklyn Museum's handling of the Saatchi show. I criticize Jane Alexander's report, okay, about the National Endowment for the Arts, and I think exposed the folly, the provincialism, the insularity of the elite in this country, who now the entire art elite is utterly shot through with political correctness and with bromides and cliches, and I see very, very little happening in the arts that is genuinely new any longer. I personally believe that creativity in the arts has migrated to animation, okay, to game design, okay, and to industrial design. I think that if I can judge by the kinds of students in those fields that I've had at the University of the Arts. There's real conceptual energy, in those particular fields, but the traditional fine arts have withered and waned. All right, so now so what else is in my book? Well, aside from I have Rihanna, who's the only performer I remain interested in is Rihanna. I'm always interested in seeing the latest Daily Mail photographs of Rihanna coming out, okay, haughtily from a nightclub at 4 a.m. in London, wearing fabulous colors on her nail polish and so on. I mean, I think she is truly, truly an artist in terms of not only the work she's done in music, okay, but also in fashion design. She's completely independent, and not to mention those X-rated Instagrams that she was doing for a number of years, but then has unfortunately stopped because her mother, okay, in Barbados, put her foot down, okay, and read her the Riot Act. And I believe I may have played a slight role in that, and that's all in the book, okay? And I feel sad about that, okay? That I paid so much attention to the Instagrams that suddenly her mother found out, okay? At any rate, Joan Rivers, okay, who was a great role model for me in the book. Gianni Versace. There are a lot of dead people, okay, like the death of Gianni Versace, the death of Norman Mailer. You can just feel the sort of passing of the guard. Martha Stewart, okay, at the height of her scandals. And then I have pieces like, I have a number of things that reflect my teaching, my classroom teaching, and one of them is teaching Shakespeare to actors, which was published in a book about Shakespeare, and just common sense, just how does one look at the plays as something to be produced rather than something to be read, on the page. And let's see, I have a number of other things here. This is an enormously long book, and it was only a fraction of what I've written. I couldn't believe how much I had written. It's like a nightmare how much I've been writing for like decade after decade. There's no way to catch up to it, to all of it. But I think a strong piece in the book is a speech I wrote on free speech, okay, for a free speech forum at Drexel University a couple of years ago, and I take a very extreme position on this, which is that free thought and free speech are absolutely the essence of democracies. Okay, they're the essence of education, and the inability of universities to enforce free speech on their campuses, their unwillingness to do so, I think it's a major scandal, absolutely major scandal, and I think exposes the gross corruption of the administrative class, which now runs things. I don't know if you realize that universities are no longer that. The faculty have no power. Okay, all power has been stripped away from them by these overpaid and very self-assured bureaucrats who they really are the primary engines of a lot of this political correctness on campus. But I find particularly appalling the the failure of so many professors nationwide in the U.S. to be able to understand that when they're in front of a class, okay, that the class is not there as a laboratory, you know, for their particular personal political ideology. I think it's perfectly justified if a professor says what his or her viewpoints are, but they must be presented, okay, as opinion, okay, and the teacher must say simultaneously, all of you, okay, are completely free to take any position you want on any issue, even if it's totally opposite to mine, okay? All right? And the failure to do that, the professors actually think, you know, they have the right to dictate, to militate, to tyrannize, you know, to bully. And so it's shocking to me how these people got into the profession. And it has to do with the general collapse of any idea, any scholarly standards, whatever, okay? In the most in the you know, sort of the high neon fields, it really started with women's studies. Okay, I'm saying this as a feminist. Someone who was writing about gender before second wave feminism. I was writing about it in college. I was writing about it. My dissertation, Sexual Personae, was, hard to believe now, was the only dissertation on sex at the Yale Graduate School when I was there. Then after that, within a few short years, everyone was writing about sex, of course. But women's studies was created, I've been trying to get people to see this for decades, and perhaps now, maybe their eyes are starting to, you know, open about it. Women's studies was just created with a snap of the fingers, okay, by administrators who wanted to make reparation, visible reparation, for the exclusion of women from so many faculties, the few number of women that were on, you know, the elite school campuses at that time. The undergraduate colleges of Yale and Princeton went co-ed, okay, at that period when I was in graduate school. And women's studies, it began as essentially window dressing in order to telegraph that this college is enlightened, okay, so they'll just throw a lot of money at some women, okay, and let them find their way to create women's studies. Now, this makes no sense. This is we're talking here about the creation, instantaneous creation of a major scholarly field. It required some thinking through in terms of what would be the training of majors in this field. What do they need to know in terms of anthropology, social history, and biology? Okay, how is it possible that that gender studies, as it's now called, has been permitted, okay, to spread, to flourish, without any reference to biology? There's no requirement whatever, okay, for undergraduates to have even a single semester of biology. Now, you can end up deciding biology is irrelevant, but not to expose students to it. Instead, to create an instant canon of new books, okay, by contemporary women's studies professors who in the beginning, many of them came from English departments. They didn't even come from any exposure to social history. And the end result was predictable, because now we have a completely impervious you know, almost like the Politburo, okay, and campus after campus, okay, and the excesses of gender studies, okay, have like spilled over into real life and are affecting, and so now we get, you know, in Hungary, you're getting, you know, efforts on the far right to ban gender studies completely from the universities because it's an ideology, you know, and not a scholarly discipline. I thought, what, and this is a principle that I have observed. It's in the book, okay, in terms of my writing for Salon and so on, which is that when problems on the left are not dealt with, okay, are not honestly and courageously dealt with, those problems go underground and gain in force and will eventually erupt on the right. this is a principle I find in, there's examples in the book, such as what happened when Janet Reno sent tanks to go knock down the walls of citizens at the Koresh Ranch, and you had a fire in which both adults and children died. And the media said nothing about this, okay, whatever. This incredible violation, okay, of normal, the normal humane procedure on the part of a democratic government. They said nothing, okay, everything was suppressed because it was the new Clinton administration. So what happened? The issue went underground, got fiercer, and it erupted 2 years later in the attack on the Murrah building, okay, by that fanatic, right-wing fanatic, okay, who killed incredible numbers of people. Right? So this is what's happening now, is that gender studies is an ideology. Okay, it is not a scholarly discipline as presently constructed in the universities, right? And why wasn't this dealt with on the left? Why was there no critique on the left? Nothing. And so it goes underground, and now it erupts in Hungary on the far right. Right? And so that's just and I think there are a lot of items in the book, especially in the media chronicle in the back of the book, that show how I believe prescient I was as a Democrat in critiquing in my Salon column problems in the Democratic Party, problems in the trending of the party toward lawyers, okay, and toward Goldman Sachs and things like that, and that these problems could be seen very, very distantly, right? But no, people didn't want to deal with it, right? And so as a consequence, you get again dissatisfactions among the populace going underground, and I was not. I was not surprised. As a Democrat, I was not surprised by the election of Donald Trump. The only people who could be surprised are those who had this rosy-eyed view of democratic ideals, which were not, in my view, being met. I'm a Bernie Sanders voter, and so I think that I'm hoping to serve as a role model to young people writing about politics, to say that if you really want to write or study politics and analyze it, and become known as an analyst, you have to in some way rise above your own partisan instincts. Otherwise, you just fall into the same dualistic dead ends. Okay, that we're in. That so many people. I mean, that's why a discussion of politics on TV has become utterly enervating. There's really, people are on one side or the other. Everything is pitched, okay, on the shows as in terms of opposites. Are you going to wave me? Okay. Oh, I have 5 minutes. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. This is a pre-plan. Okay. I have to be terminated. Okay. Okay. What was I saying about TV? Oh, I mean, it's hard to believe that in the 1990s there were really good shows on TV. Even Crossfire, which it would seem like those are opposites, two people taking opposite views. Actually, a range of viewpoint was actually permitted on TV once. You didn't have to fall into a box and have people screaming at each other. I mean, you know these shows now. You know what people are going to say before they open their mouths. But honestly, it was not the case. In case, there was so many examples. One of my favorites was on CNN and Company at 11:30 a.m. And I believe it was Kathleen Tillotson. I believe she was a Southern lady. This was when CNN was more based in Atlanta, and she would have every day three professional women on by satellite, all different women, just to discuss the day's issues, okay? And without no assistant producer getting on the phone ahead of time and drilling, and finding out what are you going to say on air, okay? Just letting us talk on air, and I thought that was marvelous. I think that most people's political viewpoints are flexible. They're not in this crazy polarized, rather childish opposition that's encouraged in American television. And by the way, I'm not kidding about those assistant producers. They are a plague. Okay, I refuse. I mean, I don't go on TV anymore. It's useless, right? But they are. I would refuse to do those. I mean, assistant producer wants to find out what you're going to say. Excuse me, they're taking all the energy out, you know, and the spontaneity out of your actual performance on the show itself. I wish people would fight back against that. Speak of childish. Okay, it's a grade school. It just shows the level, okay, of American television. Of course, the media in general have. I speak as a professor of media studies. I mean, journalism is dead. I mean, it's a big stinking corpse, okay, in the United States right now. I mean, forget that. All right. Oh, what else? What are my last things here? I have to pick and choose here. I've hit so many things, though. Wow. Okay. All right. I'll make my big statement about feminism. Okay. All right. Let me remind, okay, people who have read me before, okay, I am an equity feminist. That is, I believe in equality of opportunity, okay, for women in the professional and political realms. You're removing barriers for their advancement. However, I oppose all special protections for women. I feel that special protections of any kind are ultimately patronizing, paternalistic, okay, and infantilizing. I want to treat the workplace as a gender-neutral zone, right, and in which, yes, okay, if cases of sexual abuse should be pursued, but I believe that it's up to individual women also to communicate through their manner and through their speech and their actions, okay, what they will tolerate and what they will not tolerate. I find that in my view, there is no excuse, okay, for a highly educated, upper middle class woman, okay, professional, to be saying that she does not have the power, okay, to say something back or to scold or to complain or whatever. I think it's absolute nonsense. That what that is a woman putting her career advantage, okay, over her innate dignity and self-respect. And it is the working class women who are really unable to fight back. Women who really depend on an income for their children and so on, perhaps they're single parents, et cetera. But all this complaining, okay, by middle class women, right, about and this invoking of an oversight panels. This is what I absolutely loathe as a veteran of the 1960s, for heaven's sakes, is this deputizing of paternalistic figures who are now going to have this power of surveillance over personal life and personal behavior. I think it's a terrible mistake. Okay, this whenever you have a growth of any kinds of a bureaucracy. Bureaucracies bloat and bloat and bloat. Okay, and eventually become tyrannical. It's actually the history of the decline and fall of every culture. Okay, it should be built into every bureaucracy some sort of a mechanism that constantly curtails its size and its power. The situation on college campuses is outrageous. I have taken the extreme view all along, and I'm a college teacher, okay, which is that college administrations have no business, okay, intervening in or surveilling students' social lives. I take the extreme view on it. None. Zero. Okay? If a crime is committed on a campus, give it to the police. Right? So this business of now, paternalistic figures on campus, listening and hand-holding and hearing about what happened on a date. This is such a betrayal of the sexual revolution of the 1960s, which my generation of women, okay, had so supported. Okay? We want independent lives, independent thoughts, okay, independent relationships with other people, and not these nanny figures, okay, these substitute parent figures constantly hovering. Okay, are we ready to? Okay, all right. All right, okay, oh.
How are you defining second wave feminism, and who would be on the forefront of that quote-unquote movement?
A second wave feminism. Well, Obviously, Betty Friedan is the one who kicked it into motion when she founded the National Organization for Women, co-founded it in 1966. It was the first political organization devoted to women's rights in America, since women had won the right to vote in 1920. So she had a pivotal role in setting it forth. But then she herself quarreled, with other members of NOW, and she was eventually booted out of it, and part of it, one of her lists of, she's very abrasive personality, forceful personality. I admired her, but she could be unreasonable, and it was when she called, the young lesbians, the Lavender Menace, that there was this big revolt, against her, the book, when we look back at the Feminine Mystique, which was a surprise bestseller in 1963, when you look back at it, there are a lot of problems with it, such as there are no sources. The whole thing is unsourced. Right? And the list, the list of grievances and disasters that she says flowed, from women's, lack of professional opportunities in life and so on. I mean, it's everything. She lists cancers, body cankers. Every possible human disaster, every plague, like plagues of locusts, came from, and you feel the hysteria in the book. There's also things in it that are very surprising, such as she rejects abstract expressionism, foreign films. It's a rather provincial, culturally speaking. But at any rate, other people took over. And by the early 1970s, you have Gloria Steinem, emerging as the face of feminism, and Betty Friedan resented it. She said, "Oh, Gloria goes to Kenneth to have her hair streaked," which was true, right? And Gloria Steinem was very telegenic, at a time when television was very important, and I admired her. It's going to be hard to believe, but Time magazine, that yes, I subscribe to, actually asked the question, in the early 70s, who would make a good, first woman president? And I wrote in Gloria Steinem. Do you believe it? And because I said, oh, when age has dimmed her beauty and so on. All right. Now I thought better of it. Later on, but so Steinem. Steinem has a man problem. So this anti-male thing got embedded into feminism from a lot of these. There's some women who are really borderline crazy women at the very beginning. Some of them are really radical ones, right? But Steinem, she's not an original creator of ideas, but she was a wonderful presence. I mean, she's the one who really established that it was possible to be a reasonable person, and an attractive woman, and be a feminist. That people are not always like Andrea Dworkin, and so on, like that. Right. So what happened was I tried to join. I mean, I'm like this completely heterodox personality, aggressive, always in trouble, et cetera, et cetera. I tried to join the women's movement. I got booted out again and again and again. I've written about it. When it was 1970, 71, when I had almost that fist fight, with the New Haven Women's Liberation Rock Band, all right, because I was defending the Rolling Stones, and I had this huge screaming argument about the Rolling Stones song, Under My Thumb. And I said, look, Under My Thumb, the lyrics are sexist, yes, all right, but this is a great song, and it's in fact, it's a work of art, and I still maintain that Under My Thumb is a work of art, You had the incredible marimba, of Brian Jones in there. It's phenomenal, and also if you listen to the lyrics in an intelligent manner, you can see that there is it's about a power reversal, That's almost like something out of William Blake, where once she had me down, now I've got her down. Well, in William Blake, she'll get him down again in the next, cycle, et cetera. It's like the whole power dynamic of sex. But oh my God, that was like a hard. They were practically spitting in my face. They said, I said, this is a work of art. Art. Nothing that demeans women can be art. Did you hear that? I'm going to repeat it. All right. These feminist rock musicians said, nothing that demeans women can be art. Right there, you have it. The Stalinist view of art, okay? I follow Oscar Wilde. My first influence, okay, it was like a book called The Epigrams of Oscar Wilde that I stumbled on in a secondhand bookstore in Syracuse when I was 14, right? And there's maxims about art and about the independence of art and art's freedom from philanthropy and humanitarians and all these do-gooders and so on, right? And I didn't quite understand everything in that book, but now I understand it, okay? Everyone who wants to clean up art, make art politically correct, okay? Make it manageable, okay? Make it palatable, okay? So I mean, we need another Oscar Wilde right now. But wait, now back to your question. Wait, what was your question? It was about all right.
I think it was about the second wave of feminism.
Yeah.
And who would you call one of the leaders of the second wave of feminism?
Yeah, okay, so it's like Gloria Steinem is the face, of feminism, all right? Kate Millett was put on the cover of Time magazine for her book, okay, Sexual Politics, and she didn't particularly like the attention or want the attention from it, so Sexual Politics is the book 1970 or was it 71 that created the template, okay, of which is this taking ideology, wading into some famous book by a male artist, okay, and with your rubber stamp going misogyny, sexism, like that, so on. Kate Millett created that style, okay, all right, and even to this day people go on about her. Oh, she was this, she was that. Well, after the Betty Friedan, the anniversary of that book, okay, and I contributed to like roundtable things talking about the impact of that book. I thought I want to take another look at Sexual Politics again, and I looked at that book, and I think there's a lot of problems with that book. Okay, there are all kinds of problems because it's to me, it's very odd that Kate Millett, okay, that for the rest of her life, she never wrote a paragraph that was even remotely like that book. All right. She went out. She wrote memoirs. She wrote all kinds of other things. She became a sculptor, up the Hudson or whatever she was doing, and so on. And I really think that someone needs to dig into the history of that book. Okay, because I hear a voice in that book that is not her voice. Okay? I hear another voice. I think it's a man's voice. Okay, all right, and it's one of her professors. It's either a professor that she had at Oxford or it's a professor at Columbia. All right, and I think it's in her in the acknowledgments, she does have a list of names, and there was a mention of a couple of male professors and so on. But I think that if this book which became so important and monumental and still remembered as a landmark of new feminism and so on, if I want it to be admitted the degree to which a man, okay, used his knowledge, okay, his syntax, okay, right, and contributed to that book, okay. She did not honestly acknowledge how much. I mean, I don't think it was all that, okay, but I hear a voice that is distinctly older than our generation, because she was like my generation, I think, roughly. Although I think she's a little older than me, but there was a certain sound of that Columbia professors had that I began to pick up because I have met and had such great relationships with actually graduates of Columbia, the Great Books program of Columbia. For some reason, we're on the same. Well, for some reason, it's obvious. Okay, they have read all the great books, right, and therefore their minds are structured, okay, and organized in ways that post-structuralism can't even hope to do. All right, but anyway, then later on there was Andrea Dworkin, okay, in the 1980s. She became a leading figure of second wave feminism. And then there was the third wave in the 1990s that sort of sputtered up and sputtered out. And there was like Naomi Wolf and Susan Faludi, who Gloria Steinem embraced, okay, in a famous Time magazine cover. You could find it on the web, okay, where they look like terrorists or like underground people clinging to each other in a bare room. People said, well, what kind of vision of feminism is that? These two women. But that's where Gloria Steinem gave her imprimatur to Susan Faludi, who you'll notice Susan Faludi's career immediately sank after that. I mean, she came with a memoir about 2 years ago about her father, and having now turned transgender and wherever he is in Europe, and now she's recounting the horrors of her childhood. Her father, attacking her mother's lover, okay, with a knife all over the house, blood all over the house. I thought, this is her childhood, right? I want feminists, to come from good families, okay, and solid families. I don't. Why is every single feminist, like Tracy, Gloria Steinem, I mean, she's written a lot about it. Like her mother was mentally disturbed, and Gloria Steinem had to nurse her. The father abandoned them to a rat-filled apartment, and so on. This is why they're so anti-male. Okay, they're just anti their fathers. It's not really this. I have been trying to get the anti-male obsession of feminism out of it, okay, for decade after decade after decade. And I constantly say, only weak women cannot admit the strength of men and of the great achievements of men. Okay, I've learned incredible amount from men. Okay, all right. I admire men. Okay, all right. I don't feel I have to say, oh, they're all toxic and they're all and like always. The little claws out and so on and so forth. All right, and it's gotten really bad. You all know how bad it's gotten. Okay, where everything about anything masculine is automatically defined. Okay, as a social construction. All right, please. Okay, my father's generation went to World War II. Okay, my father was a paratrooper. I've got all of my uncles. They were in the Navy, and, in the Army, and so on. Okay, I saw men. Okay, men who could do anything. Okay, men who could take a piece of wood and like make capable men. Okay. Men who respected women. There was no abuse, okay, that I was ever, not, my whole Italian-American experience upstate New York, never an example of anyone dishonoring a woman or abusing a woman, okay? These were incredibly, talented men who could do anything, okay? I could have like nutball, my uncle would make on his off hours, absolutely work of art, okay, and so on. My grandfather would be making baskets in the backyard. They worked, they gave to women and children. Men have been sacrificing for women and children for like millennia. And so instead we have all this like focus on the horrors of men, the worst men, the brutal men, okay? Well, every brutal person should be jailed, okay? Obviously. Oh, sorry, am I going on too long?
I think we're actually out of time.
Oh.
I'm sorry. Sorry we couldn't get to your other questions. I'm very sorry.
Oh, well.